All right, welcome to the
Recording in progress.
Wednesday, January 17th, 2024 electronic meeting of the Ann Arbor Transportation Commission. This meeting is being held electronically, but we intend to conduct it similarly to an in-person meeting. Public comment will be via telephone or Zoom only. To speak during any of the public comment opportunities, please call 206-337-9723 and enter meeting ID number 934-6385-2907 or join via the Zoom link. The information is also available on the published agenda, in the public notices section of the city website, and on the broadcast of this meeting on CTN Channel 16. Let's see. I will, okay. Let's do roll call now, if we could, Christopher, please.
Yeah, no problem. I'll now call roll. I've received regrets from Commissioner Bolden, Hutchinson, and Margolis, who will not be able to attend. Please say here and from where you're dialing when your name is called. Commissioner Briggs. Commissioner Brogan.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Okay. Commissioner Atumaki.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Hook.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Keeler.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Clayman.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Lee.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Carpenter.
Here from Superior Township.
Commissioner Ramaswamy.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Hess.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Lieutenant Mike Sherman.
Here from Tyrone Township.
Okay, that we have quorum.
Thank you. There's two items on the consent agenda today, approval of the agenda and approval of the minutes. Are there any modifications to the consent agenda? Yes, Pete.
Here.
Okay, yeah, unmute yourself, please, Pete.
Sorry. I would just like to make a comment about the minutes before we approve them.
Sure.
We got an extra person who I don't think was at the meeting. I don't think Perfina was at the meeting last week, but she's shown as present in the minutes, or last month.
Okay, yeah. So Chris or Raymond, I guess, if you could, yeah, amend that. Any other, thanks for noticing that, Pete.
Yes, thank you.
Any other modifications to the agenda or minutes? All right, motion to approve. Made by Wanwu, seconded by Megan. All those in favor of the motion, please say yes or raise your hand. All those opposed, please say no or raise your hand. I believe it is approved. All right, public comment. This is an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes. Please call 206-337-9723 and enter meeting ID number 934-6385-2907 or connect via Zoom as described on the agenda. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand one by one using the last 3 digits of your phone number or the person's Zoom ID. In order to electronically raise your hand to indicate your desire to speak, please press *9 on your phone or select the raise hand button in Zoom. You'll hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. When speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any television or background sounds so that we can hear you clearly. Raymond, do we have any members of the public who have raised their hand?
Give it just a moment to see if anybody raises. We do have a couple members from the public attending, but I don't see any hands raised at the moment.
Okay, seeing none. Thank you to everyone who did send emails. There are 6 emails in our packet, so please take a look at those if you haven't already. All right, next up in the business section, it's time to select to vote for a chair and vice chair of the commission. So Raymond, if you could walk us through that process, please.
Yeah, thank you. So pursuant to the bylaws, a new chair and vice chair must be seated by March 1st. And the election for those positions must occur at least 1 month before the current officer's term expires. And this is all per the bylaws. So, obviously February 1st, this is our last meeting before February 1st. So that's why we have to conduct the elections for chair and vice chair tonight. If you had a chance to look at the homework, we did paste in the relevant information about the responsibilities of the chair and vice chair. And I'll just quickly read off the most pertinent part, which is the chair shall preside at all meetings and shall decide points of order and procedure subject to the provisions of the bylaws. The chair shall have the privilege of discussing and voting on all matters before the commission. The vice chair shall assume the duties of the chair in the chair's absence. One other thing that anybody who may be interested in the position should know, I meet with the chair and the vice chair 2 Fridays typically before the meeting. So then that way we can set the agenda. We do that kind of in unison before we start putting together all the materials. So there's a kind of unwritten obligation as well in terms of what we've historically done. And so for this point now, I turn it back over to you and see if there are any nominations for chair and vice chair. And then depending upon how the nominations go, the commission can decide to take it all in one motion for chair and vice chair or to separate that out. So we can kind of handle it how you'd like to handle it.
Thank you, Raymond. I would like to nominate Megan for vice chair. Yes, Molly.
I would like to nominate Brett for chair.
Beat me
Thank
to it, Molly.
What?
You beat me to it.
Awesome.
Any other nominations? All right, seeing none, is there a motion to elect myself, Brett Hadamaki, as chair and Megan Broven as vice chair of the Transportation Commission? Is there a motion? Wanu, seconded by Molly. All those in favor of the motion to elect myself as chair and Megan as vice chair, please say yes or raise your hand.
Yes.
All those opposed, please say no or raise your hand. All right. I think that's that. Is that it, Raymond? They have another year of us?
I think we're good to go. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. I look forward to another year and thanks to Megan for volunteering to be vice chair again.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, let's get into the annual report then, the 2023 annual report. You'll have seen in the packet as the final draft of the 2023 annual report of the Transportation Commission. We reviewed a draft last month and staff will be asking for a vote in this meeting. So Chris, if you could give a brief overview of the document and what's changed since last month.
Yes, no problem. Let me just go ahead and share my screen. Okay, can everyone see the annual report? Is it now showing up?
No, yeah, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so just to start off, the only things that really changed was I added the chair's statement. Here, the statement from the chair, right here. If seems my internet is a little laggy. Apologies for that. Okay, so the statement from the chair was added. Brett provided us language, and it's right here. And the only other addition is the inclusion of the December files and the motions that were made during the December meeting, right here in the bottom. So the December work plan and the corresponding file IDs for December. Now, okay, right here. And yep, those are pretty much the only things that were added to the annual report. We have had a quick conversation regarding the picture. If you guys wanted to take another picture, given that the December attendance was a little short, but I'll leave that up to you guys, or we can keep the picture as is. But yeah, those are pretty much the only two updates to the annual report, and I'll open for any questions that you guys may have.
Let's see, it looks like we had 12 people. I'm not sure. Would it be better to do another picture now? It seemed like we've added maybe one or two people and then also lost one or two people. So what do you think, Raymond? Should we just do another one just for the sake of it and you guys can choose, or I don't know.
You know, one thing I was thinking, Chris, if we could get creative, what we could do is paste in the folks who aren't here. We could take their tiles, their little, Hollywood squares or Brady Bunch pictures and paste them into the matrix. Since we do have some folks tonight that weren't able to join, and then vice versa. There's Nick and Julie aren't able to make it tonight. So I'd hate to lose them as well. So I'd be up for another picture. And then Chris can have full discretion in terms of which picture he thinks is better of each of you, if you want.
All right. Yeah, so if you want to stop the screen share and do whatever you need to do, Chris, count us down or whatever.
Okay, I'm gonna have everyone pose on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and it looks like I was able to save that picture, so we are good to go. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Any other comments or questions about the annual report? Hopefully people had a chance to look through it. Any comments? I hope everyone's proud of all that's in there. It was a great year. The theme of my statement was that it was kind of an implementation or an execution year. The planning stages are a lot of fun and are great, but I'm happy to be focusing a little bit more on implementation of all of our great plans, and I think 2023 was representative of that. Before we go on to the next section, though, I would like to welcome back Councilmember Erica Briggs to the Transportation Commission. It's been a year, but she's back. And thank also especially Councilmember Dharma Ekman for her time on the commission last year. You may have seen a note from Dharma in the public comment emails. But Erica, it's great to have you back. You guys are kind of flipping back and forth, and it's good to trade you and Dharma back and forth. So welcome.
Yeah, hi. We both love it, so we just have to take turns.
Yeah. All right.
And pardon me, Brett, if I may, I think we do seek a action on the annual report.
Yep. So is there a motion to approve the 2023 annual report and forward it to City Council?
I would move to approve.
All right, motion by Larry and seconded by Megan. All those in favor, please say yes or raise your hand.
Aye. Yes.
All those opposed, please say no, raise your hand. Motion passes, so City Council will get this report. Next up is the fiscal year 2025 policy agenda. Every year we pass along policy and legislative suggestions to City Council's policy agenda committee concerning local and state issues. We introduced this item last month and we'd like to continue the discussion with a possible vote on the document tonight. If we're comfortable with how it turns out, we'll be, kind of editing it in real time. So Raymond, if you could display where we're at and, record what we suggest in the discussion. Okay, so you've got, this is the current state of the document, right?
Yes. So yeah, thank you, Brett, for that introduction. So yeah, as we've mentioned last month, and just to reiterate, typically what we've done in the past is kind of recycle the previous policy agenda recommendations and then add to it or make changes to it based on the preference of the commission. So I've gone through and just done some minor changes based on some of the, just updating years and then questioning if there's one that can be removed. I did get some recommendations from the RIDE via Matt, and I've gone through and pasted some of those in. Matt, admittedly, I may have not gotten through all of them, so I might need you to QA/QC those to make sure that I can pull those over appropriately. So we can do this a couple of different ways. We do have a fair amount of time allocated for this discussion. If you want, I can just kind of read through them and pause and just see if you have changes, or if everyone's had a chance to do that. I don't want to necessarily waste your time by reading words on a screen. So really, however you'd like me to do that, I'm happy to do it. And then, like as Brett said, I think the idea is I'll do my best to try to make edits on the fly. So I have track changes on. You can see any additions or deletions. And then if everyone's comfortable with the way things look, after the end of this discussion, if you feel comfortable voting on it tonight so that it can be forwarded on to council, that's an opportunity. But I think there have been meetings in the past where we haven't finalized the document till February. So if we don't get through it all tonight, it's not the end of the world. But this is the last, major substantive item on the agenda. So I think there's a fair amount of time for us to talk through this issue. So any preferences on how I do it? Do you want me to kind of just quickly read some things and then just pause, or just kind of jump to things that folks have comments on?
I think we can at least, we don't need to read them, but let's maybe go point by point a little bit here. For example, the first one, it's a big one. It's the speed limit reduction, advocating for a lower statewide minimum speed limit. This would be a state action, as well as a House bill concerning speeding in school zones. And then the third sub bullet is changing, moving away from the 85th percentile rule for setting speed limits. So I think these are evergreen requests. I don't think these have changed in a number of years. There may be some motion on these at the state level. I'm not sure. I've heard some encouraging things, but I think it's, in my opinion, it's wise to keep them. Certainly, the changes haven't happened yet. So, is there any comments about from people that would like to change the wording or add any sub bullets to this effort to reduce speed limits? All right, if not, we'll move on to the next one, which is to advocate that for MDOT to make it easier to implement crosswalks, sidewalks, bike lanes, speed reduction, bus lanes, and road reconfigurations on state roads. So I see that you added bus lanes to the list. Motorized or transit improvement on state roads. So yeah, the gist of this is that make it easier for us to advocate for changes to state roads. Is that right, Raymond?
Correct. Yeah, since this is state facing. Yeah, and just as a reminder, the first half of the document is directed towards the state. The second half of the document is directed to the local officials. So yeah, pretty much everything we talk about for this first part is, for MDOT or the state legislature to possibly consider.
Okay. So I like the addition of bus lanes. I think it's an oversight that we had. So I appreciate adding that. Are there any other additions or comments that people want, or maybe more specificity on this? Now's the time. Yeah, Erica.
Yeah, and I apologize. I didn't read this completely thoroughly, but I don't. One addition that might be useful is to advocate for the state, and potentially this actually might be a federal recommendation as well, around crossings on high-speed rail. I know that's something that we're dealing with in terms of, at-grade crossings on high-speed rail. It seems to be a little bit of a challenge. So is that, sorry, thank you. All there. Yay.
All right. Okay, so if we're happy with that second bullet point, we can move on then. You mentioned the rail.
I'm sorry. I'm going to keep, now I'm reading it. So MDOT isn't actually allowed to do this. I think it's a state legislative. It's actually something in the they don't have the discretion to do this. So it might be useful to add if I'm correct on this. Well, I'm happy to be corrected if I'm wrong, Mr. Hess. I believe that's a legislative issue.
Sorry, which bullet point are we talking about? Brett?
They advocate for MDOT and rail operators to provide safe, non-motorized crossings across active rail lines. The issue being that we have a high-speed rail line, and MDOT isn't, I don't think, permitted to provide at-grade crossings along high-speed rail, and so we've hit kind of a legislative. It would be helpful potentially to have that discretion. I know that we've got some buy-in already from our state legislative delegation on this issue. It's not that they're not unaware of this, but just to have our policy documents supporting this.
Yeah, Erica, I don't think you're incorrect, but I think the language is somewhat nuanced. It just talks about providing safe crossings. So that may be under, over, and I think you're right. At-grade crossings are not acceptable for high-speed rail. But this doesn't necessarily call out the distinction between under, over, at-grade. I think it just talks about safe and leaves it to, a bigger policy type issue. So does that satisfy you, or do you have other language in mind?
I was just going to recommend advocate for the state legislature, MDOT, and rail operators, so that we are addressing the fact that it might be a legislative issue.
Seems like that's a reasonable add. Just add the legislature to the. Okay.
Thank you.
Pete?
I think that's a good thing to add about state legislature. I mean, I know that there are restrictions about at-grade crossings, but if there's a safe way to do them, then I guess I'd like to have that as an option. On this bullet point, I guess I'd also like to, I wonder if we need to say something about studying the impact of the kind of thing that they're proposing with the restricting access with fences and so forth. Like, is that a thing that we should be asking for? Is an impact analysis of who's going to be cut off and where they're going? And right now they're doing it without any regard to who is crossing and why. And it just feels to me that we need to make that a requirement before we let them put fences around the rails in our city. So I guess that's kind of a question for the group here.
Would that be better in the local section of this, specific to that project? Or
I mean, if MDOT is going to be adding in fences to keep people off rail, then I feel like they need to be understanding the impact of what they're doing. Is that the root of what I'm proposing?
not the best. I'm not sure where the best place to get something like that. Okay, I see.
Or,
Okay.
I mean, perform an impact analysis before adding any restrictions.
Okay, I think that's
So yeah, I just added some language. If crossings are to be eliminated, then an impact assessment or analysis should be performed before restrictions are made. Does that capture the intent of what you're suggesting, Pete?
Yeah, I mean, I guess specifically like unmarked or illicit crossings, you know, that would be impacted by the by the fences. Like, I don't think that I haven't seen that they're proposing to remove any marked crossings as part of what they're proposing. But I suppose maybe they are talking about removing at-grade crossings. Is that in play also? Like at Getty's or
Well, I mean, generally speaking, you know, I'm not an expert when it comes to rail, but generally speaking, there's a lot of federal programs and rail operators try to minimize the number of crossings, period. Not just for bikes, peds, but also for vehicles, because those represent, you know, conflict points for them and delay for their network as well as the other networks. So like there's a Federal Railroad Administration funding grant for like crossing elimination, whether that means bridges or tunnels or things like that. That's a real program. So I think that is probably something that's somewhat in play. I don't hear a lot of discussion about that necessarily here because there aren't a lot of good options. But you know, if you look at big cities, Chicago and others, this is a constant thing they're trying to solve for. So
yeah. I'm just bringing this up because I was struck by how their focus was just on eliminating access so that people could not get onto the tracks with no thought to how else it was going to affect the community. I mean, that's what I took away from the meeting that I went to. And
maybe we could just add something like if crossings, you know, parentheses, marked or unmarked are to be eliminated, you know, okay. Does that get to
yeah.
Okay. All right, the bullet point above this, we kind of skipped over, but I want to make sure there aren't any comments on the request that we advocate for MDOT to further define and consistently adhere to their complete streets and Vision Zero policies, including congestion pricing tolls or a VMT tax. Anything more that people want to say about that? Complete streets and Vision Zero. I don't think anything's changed. I don't think they have any new policies. I assume they still have these policies at the state level. You know, there's not much anything specific here other than encouraging them to continue to pursue those, but okay.
yeah, I did. I think I put it in the report there. They are reassessing, I think, their complete streets policy currently. And they have public comment on that right now. So I think it's still in the books, and I'm not necessarily suggesting it's going to go away or anything, but I think they're seeking input on it right now.
Okay. All right, and then moving along, advocate for increased transit funding. There's a change here from we said both local and regional to just statewide. Is there a reason for that change? I'm curious.
Yeah, and I think this was one of the proposals from the ride. What I interpreted it to mean was just to kind of clean up some of that language. Matt, I don't know if you have a different take on it.
Sure, I'll jump in. There are maybe 70, 80 transit agencies across the state. At the state level, it's one pot of money that gets distributed by formula. So to ask the state for more funding for our local transit agency, and hey guys, I love that. That's if we want to do that, that's wonderful. But this will align with other advocates like the Michigan Public Transit Association, who sort of have recognized a uniform approach, asking the state to increase funding for all the transit agencies, has a generally better, excuse me, better chance of appealing to the entirety of the legislature because everyone across the state benefits. This is, I think, a change in that regard. If the commission feels strongly about the original wording, I certainly can go either way on it.
Well, that explanation certainly makes sense to me. I'm not sure if anyone else has any objections. So there's no interest in requesting a reconsideration of the formulas or how the pie is sliced or anything. It's just an interest in increasing the size of the pie.
That's how I interpreted this.
But from your perspective, though, I mean, do you want to make a statement that no, we deserve a bigger piece of the pie or anything like that?
I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole.
So make sure
changing these funding formulas is about the most radioactive thing you can do in Lansing, and would make us unpopular with every other transit agency in the state. So the ride will not suggest that, and I would encourage this commission not to consider that.
All right, just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Fair enough.
All right. Advocate for MDOT to allow bus on shoulder operations on key freeway segments. This is a new one this year. Is there anything you want to say about this, Matt?
Sure. And you'll see, it looks like Raymond's caught a lot of the things that I sent him, admittedly very, very recently. So thank you, Raymond, for catching up. Trying to consolidate comments at both the state and local in the last year's agenda and add a few other things to bring it up to sort of consistency with the rides emerging legislative agenda, our long range plan, the region's plans, and again, the state association. To allow bus on shoulder operations is sort of a complement to the allow bus lanes one a few bullets earlier. This is basically that but for freeways. So bus on shoulder operations, if you're not aware of it, very common in Minnesota, for example. If there is traffic congestion that has blocked the regular travel lanes, the buses in Minneapolis are allowed to go onto the shoulder to bypass the traffic. No one else has this allowance. It's just something they do for the buses, only on freeway, limited access arterial sort of operations. So that would be something that we'd suggest. It would only be applicable right now in the I-94 and US 23 corridors, where the Air Ride Michigan Flyer service operates and the Detroit to Ann Arbor service. But in the future, we hope to have more expansive, longer distance park and ride options, and it could be very useful in those areas.
All right, any objections to adding that? All right, if not, next one is also a new one. Encourage the state to consider allowing road pricing to replace the diminishing gas tax. I'm assuming due to hybrids and electric vehicles.
I think that was another one of my suggestions, so I'll take the bullet for that one. This is provocative. I don't know if you guys have the taste for something like this, but you're absolutely right, Brett. As EVs and others, are more common, the amount of gas being sold is not what it was. The amount of money taken in by the state to pay for roads is not what it was. Those of us in the industry know that at some point there will be a break, and the new source of revenue is going to be needed aside from the gas tax. A lot of people are looking at road pricing or odometer taxes, as they're sometimes called, as a way to do this. I don't see this as something that would be accomplished in the next 5 years, but something to sort of put us at the vanguard of that discussion.
I think I might have a suggestion, which is instead of suggesting a replacement, just say consider alternatives to replace diminishing gas tax revenues. I mean, maybe somebody would want to do it based on vehicle weight or, some other combination of inputs. I don't know, unless you.
Well, what the state has traditionally done with an idea like that is to say, that sounds great. We'll take it from the schools. So to leave it open to any alternative allows the legislature to sort of shift money between pots they already have. Moving to road pricing creates a more direct user pay relationship when people are driving and increases the direct costs of that activity as opposed to shifting it from schools or medical care or something else.
Okay, yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, I appreciate that. Molly?
Could you explain road pricing?
Sure, and Raymond can jump in if I get it wrong. Basically, the idea is you pay for the amount of driving that you do. The phrase odometer tax is sometimes used, but the basic idea is you pay per mile. The clincher is, how do you tally the mileage? Obviously, we're not calling every car in and checking their odometer every year, but there are various ways to do it. Congestion pricing is one example of this type of thing. It's a bit bold and it's probably a bit long term. I'm not sure Michigan is ready for it, but doesn't mean we can't consider it.
Yeah, and another term that I hear used a lot is vehicle miles traveled tax, VMT tax, odometer tax, similar to what Matt said. To make a distinction, my understanding is congestion pricing might be a little bit different. This is like, peak hour, a higher toll rate, if you will, if you're traveling at peak hours, whether it be AM peak or PM peak. The idea is to help offset some of the congestion by getting people to choose either other forms of transportation during those times or if they have discretionary trips to not make them at that time. So, I know some of the road pricing VMT tax was tested out. Pacific Northwest state, I can't remember if it was Oregon or Washington a couple of years ago. There's talk of congestion pricing coming out of New York currently. I don't know if that's actually made it all the way through. So these concepts are not new in other parts of the world, but they've had a hard time sticking in this country. But as Matt also said, we have actually already crossed over the threshold where, the federal gas tax and state taxes are no longer solvent. They no longer bring in enough revenue to fund the transportation bills. So they're always infused with additional revenue from the federal government or state governments or others. So, this idea about diminishing returns on gas tax is real. And one other thing I'll mention is electric vehicles are part of the discussion, but also CAFE standards in general. Like cars are just becoming more fuel efficient. So in total, the number of percentage of vehicles that are electric are still relatively small compared to the overall fleet. But as miles per gallon increases fleet wide, per every OEM, that's really what's taking a lot of the toll on the amount of gas tax that's generated. Analysis that back in my last job in Las Vegas, and that's really where the hit was coming from.
All right, and I believe don't some states include an additional fee, in the annual registration? If it's a hybrid, then they pay an extra $400 for the registration, and if it's a BEV, an extra X number of dollars. Is that? I mean, I just don't want to prescribe a solution here. But I think we're kind of doing that. Not prescribing a solution by putting examples here. So I'm fine with how it reads now. But that's something else that I think I've seen states do, is just do an annual fee for those types of vehicles, which is a known thing. Then you don't have to try to figure out how far people have driven in a state that doesn't have inspections and such. Molly, sorry, Molly. Yep.
Thanks. I So I'm fine with giving examples, but I don't want to take a weight-based. I would love to include weight-based pricing on the list. There are other benefits to disincentivizing heavy vehicles. We know that heavier vehicles are deadlier vehicles, and so while I recognize that like the key argument in this bullet is about funding, I'd love to keep weight-based on the table.
Okay, I like the way this reads now. Any other comments on this one? Erica.
Fine with it. I just wanted to chime in that we charge electric vehicles. We're often sabotaging our transition to a cleaner energy supply. So there's criticisms of that fee that we have. So anyway, I'm going on the record on that one.
All right. Let's see, what's next? Oh, statewide crosswalk law. So advocating that the state adopt essentially Ann Arbor's state crosswalk law. This one has been around for a few years as well. You know, basically where drivers are required to stop and yield to people when they're waiting at the crosswalk, not just in the crosswalk. That's the distinction that is different in Ann Arbor. So we're advocating that the state adopt that. Any comments on this one? Right. Next, this is advocating a revision to the traffic control manual to expand signage options for bike lanes, including the may use full lane, which I know I've seen around Ann Arbor. But it's it's not in the Michigan MUTCD. Raymond, is that still an applicable ask? Have they made that change? Do you know?
You know, admittedly, I don't know. I might need to do some research on that. I don't remember seeing an announcement on it. I remember, you know, the advocacy on this for the last couple of years. But to my knowledge, this is still appropriate, but I can just double check.
It doesn't hurt, obviously, even if it has happened. So, and it's also just generally asking for expanded options, including that one particular one. So any comments on this or any additions or anything people want to add to this one? All right. The next one I think we added last year, advocate for legalization of video surveillance and automated tracking and notification of speeding and traffic violations. So I think the update is, didn't this to some extent be, you know, is it now allowed in construction zones, on highways, something like that?
Yeah, the last I heard, there was legislation being contemplated to allow, like you said, on freeways, on MDOT only projects, to allow for some sort of automated enforcement. I know when we were talking to our legal, we were just saying that, you know, if the idea in that instance is to protect vulnerable road users, those being construction workers on the freeway, there are other instances of vulnerable road users that, you know, if you have high crash locations on arterials or other local roadways, that justification should, you know, expand beyond just freeway operations. But I'm not aware that the legislation passed, but again, I can look into that.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think we need to know for this, but any comments or requests for this? Anything people want to add about this one? Molly?
Hi again. Given that there's a growing body of research about the way that automated enforcement, even when, oh, that's the bedtime alarm. Even when there are attempts to be equitable about the deployment of these systems, they often end up having inequitable impacts for a wide variety of reasons. I would love to have, in the same breath that we're advocating for video surveillance and automated enforcement, some requirement for data collection around disparate impacts so that at minimum we know, like, if it's not working out, we know and can advocate in subsequent years that there are changes to the programs.
I think that's a really smart addition. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I know that I've generally been outvoted on this one, so I'm trying to find something that might be a middle ground.
No, I like that addition. I think that's a smart thing to do. Pete?
I just want to say that I 100% agree with Molly on this. And I might like to go further and say that locally, if these are available, that we need to have some very strict requirements about how we deploy them and who gets the revenue. And, you know, I do not want a system like this to become a revenue generating machine for a private corporation. I'm 100% not okay with that.
Yeah, I think that's
I don't know where the right place to reflect that is, but I'm a little uncomfortable with this, with having this line item in there without having some guardrails around how we would deploy it if it became legal.
I mean, that might be a bridge we cross later, or we could include it in the ask. So something like advocate for legalization of municipal deployed video surveillance, or you know, non-private or something like that.
I mean, okay. I guess I wasn't aware that there are restrictions against municipalities owning and operating these. I just thought that it was like technologically difficult for them to achieve, or, you know, prohibitively expensive with needing, you know, high-tech computer resources to implement them. So I'm not.
I think there's state laws, you know, I mean, Raymond, you know, can expand, but there are, where there's state laws prohibiting speed cameras and the like.
Yes.
Yeah, our understanding is automated enforcement is not allowed in the state of Michigan.
Right, but specifically, there's nothing prohibiting in areas where they are allowed. It's not that municipalities are disallowed from using them. It's just that it would be difficult for a municipality to do it. Am I making sense there? Like, I'm not.
Well, I think what you're getting at is you're right. It is not uncommon for municipalities to contract this work out to third parties that have the technology out-of-box solution. And then, you know, they either have a flat fee or they get some fee based off of the number of tickets issued or whatever the case may be. I'm not too familiar with the different funding models on that. But I think Pete, I'm going to try to read a little bit into some of your concerns. Some states and communities have gotten into trouble because, you know, these private companies were left unchecked and they were kind of flagrantly issuing tickets. You know, for example, red light cameras are one, you know, so they're speeding, and then another common application is red light running cameras. You know, if you've been in major metros, you may have seen these before. And, you know, some research had been shown that, you know, they were issuing tickets to vehicles going through the intersection on yellow. And so, you know, they were trying to maximize their profit, and that's when those communities and those companies got into trouble. So it is definitely something known in this space about automated enforcement. And I think, you know, a lot of the concerns that you all are raising are appropriate. And, you know, before anything would ever be rolled out in Ann Arbor, it would be something that we would talk to this commission about. And the one thing I would just so we don't go too far down the rabbit hole, you know, right now it's not even permitted. So talking about what a local rollout would be feels, you know, the first step would just be to allow it. If that's something this commission wants to advocate for in this policy document, I think that would be the first step. If it ever becomes possible, then we can add to the local. But it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to add conditions on the local end if it's not even permissible. So I think, you know, adding some of these guardrails, you know, to use Pete's term, you know, talking about, you know, data collection or things like that, you know, to determine disparate impacts, all of that makes sense. So then that way the signal to the state would be, we think this could be a tool, but it has to be a tool that's like kept in check. That makes sense. So yeah, that's just kind of where my head is at, or where my recommendation is. But obviously, you can go in the direction you'd like on this.
Yeah, Pete?
Well, I guess I'm uncomfortable asking for this technology without understanding what else we need to ask for, the full picture of what else we need to ask for to enable it to be rolled out in a way that's acceptable. Like I wouldn't want to, I wouldn't want a camera-based technology to be legalized with restrictions against the kind of guardrails that we think we need, so that our hands are tied. I don't know. I'm just thinking that maybe this needs some more thought before we're ready to say that we think it's a good idea. More thought about what those requirements would be to make it effective and acceptable and equitable and something that we want in Ann Arbor.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if this is the place to get into the details. I mean, after all, this does go to the council policy committee. And then the lobbyists and legislators, but looking at the level of all of these bullet points, I don't know if we should get into any more details, or if there are specific guardrails other than data collection and determining disparate impacts. We can consider that, but I don't think we need to design the system here.
If I may add, and Eric, I see you have your hand up. Sorry for interrupting. I did want to just highlight one thing. When we had the conversation, I think a year ago, or maybe it was even the year previous when this first showed up, the language was changed. Actually, automated enforcement is not even suggested here. It just talks about surveillance, tracking, and notification. But we took out the enforcement piece and actually issuing a ticket because of some of the concerns that you are raising. So I don't know if that helps with some of the heartburn that I'm hearing from some of the commission members, but I think that was one of the ways we tried to come to a compromise on some of that language last time, for whatever that's worth.
Thanks, Chairman. Erica?
Yeah, and I was just going to provide a little bit more reassurance, perhaps, that it's not my sense that that this would be a top priority for our lobbyists to be moving forward in Lansing. And so what we would be essentially be doing oftentimes when this moves forward, if we saw movement on this type of legislation from a legislature and something got actually got introduced, I know in the past, sort of our lobbyist is working with staff and checking in, and obviously this is a hot topic and of particular interest in Ann Arbor. So I'd expect that if we actually saw movement on this, there would actually be a fair amount of debate or conversation internally, and also potentially with the Transportation Commission in terms of, do we think that legislation that was introduced is legislation we would want to support or not? So I wouldn't get too worried about this providing too much guidance for us to our lobbyists to just blanketly, say Ann Arbor supports this type of legislation.
Thanks, Erica. So unless anyone has any words to change this, let's move on. We can always come back at the vote if any other thoughts come to mind on this. The next two, I think, are deleted from last year. Matt, if you want to maybe briefly talk about why, or sorry, the second one wasn't deleted but changed. If you want to briefly cover those.
Sure, thank you. And again, these are ones I've suggested to Raymond for the commission's consideration. So the first bullet about amending the RTA Act. In 2019, there was a unsuccessful effort to try to circumvent Macomb County's veto power at the Regional Transit Authority and have a sort of RTA junior arrangement. That didn't get off the ground. And I'll be honest, I don't know anyone in the region, broader Southeast Michigan region, who's still considering it. So I'm wondering if this bullet is simply out of date, and we may be the only ones still pushing for it. The RTA or subcomponents of it have other laws that they can use if they want to link up and do something without Macomb County. But I just think amending the legislation, that may be just obsolete, and we may be the only ones still pulling for that one. Funding mechanisms beyond the property tax, and this kind of goes to the one we talked about before. I reworded the second bullet, the bottom of the page there, to be more inclusive, to expand to transportation and transit agencies, and possibly the city of Ann Arbor could qualify as a transportation agency and its expenses, to tap other sources of revenue, again, back to road pricing, vehicle registration, sales tax, etc. It covers a lot of the same ground as the deleted sections of the two bullets, but it's a bit more general and may even be redundant with the bullet we discussed earlier about road pricing.
All right, thanks for all that background. I'm encouraged to hear that there are still mechanisms that we could, circumvent Macomb County or, the transit authorities in the other areas could still work together. Okay, it's good to know that that first bullet point can be removed without concern. So yeah, does the second bullet point we were talking about, is it redundant?
Well, the one thing I would maybe just, if I may interject a thought, is, up above where we talk about new revenues, I think this is meant to offset gas tax.
Yeah, the other one is just new revenues in general. Yeah.
Right. And I think the bullet point down below really talks about the over-reliance on property tax, especially with local and regional governments. So they do feel somewhat distinct to me, even though there is overlap. That Venn diagram includes a lot of the same tools and the same types of taxes, but one is really kind of for the state and how it collects sort of, transportation tax. The other is just allowing municipalities, regional governments to do something other than property. I think maybe one thing to help clarify that, if I may suggest something, allow transportation and transit agencies access to other sources of revenues beyond property tax, such as road pricing, vehicle registration, sales tax, etc. Does that help clarify?
I like it. Matt?
I think Raymond said it better than I did. This is about the reliance on the property tax for something that is inherently a regional function.
Great. All right, let's move on. So you all can read this, move away from level of service as a means to assess the impact of projects on the road network in favor of other metrics that don't prioritize vehicular speed. I don't know the mechanism by which, this would occur. Are there, directives within MDOT? I assume they have processes and procedures that include level of service. Hopefully it's within the legislature's ability to direct those. Hopefully this is something that the legislature can do. Assuming that's true, then I'm happy to keep this on here. Yeah, do you know, Raymond? I mean, is it a reasonable ask? I mean, I hope it is that they can direct MDOT to change.
Yeah, not being a legislative expert, I have seen other states with and I don't mean to offend anyone, but states that have perhaps more progressive DOTs have moved in a direction away from sort of level of service, vehicular level of service. But it's not too uncommon for state legislatures to help put their weight on the scale if they're not getting the sort of action out of a state DOT that would align with their values. So I think this is appropriate, and whether it's directed at the legislature or MDOT, I think it sounds generic enough that it could go to either parties.
Okay, sounds good. Support the Michigan Drive Safe bills to restore the rights of everyone who would be eligible to obtain a driver's license. Okay, so we have some updates here. Senate bills 265 and 267. So these are the current updated bills for the Senate and the House. And I guess are they still moving through those respective chambers? And we're just putting our weight behind it, supporting them?
I can jump in because I think this was originally on here because of my own advocacy. There has historically been enough support to get these bills introduced, but there has not historically been enough support to actually get them passed. And so they keep getting introduced and then they keep stalling out. But the advocacy efforts for these bills continue. This is an active campaign by a coalition across the state. And so I think it's appropriate for us to continue to put Ann Arbor's support behind these bills.
All right, thank you.
And I think Matt and his team helped provide some of the updated Senate bills and House bill numbers, so thank you. A question maybe back to Molly and or Matt and or the whole commission. Should we eliminate the specific bill references? Is the Michigan Drive Safe bill enough just to keep it evergreen, or do you like that as a point of reference for people to cross reference against? And just throwing that idea out there.
I mean, I would be okay with removing the numbers. I don't know. I mean, I feel like I want to toss it to Erica in terms of what we know about our lobbyist and whether or not it's useful to name specific bill numbers or whether it's enough to say that this is something we support in principle.
I think if the specific bill numbers are there, it's always helpful. We're updating this on an annual basis. So if the bill numbers are still, I mean, it's probably more helpful to have it there than not. And we can update it if it becomes outdated.
All right, thank you. Before we move on to the local agenda, are there any asks for additions to the state level agenda? All right, seeing none, let's move on to the local portion. First one, strengthen partnerships with stakeholders, including MDOT, AAPS, and U of M. It's not very specific, but I guess I think City Council reading this would understand the meaning behind this. So unless there's an appetite to add specifics to this, is there any? I don't know. Are there specific things that people want to point to, or partnerships that we want to mandate? All right, if not, let's move on to the second one. Prioritize data-driven decision-making by using benchmarking and statistical data collection. I think the city staff does a good job on this already, very good job, but it doesn't hurt to keep it on here, I think. Any other comments? All right, use accessibility as an evaluation criteria for analysis of transportation investments. Yeah, I don't know. It's also kind of generic. I don't know if these kinds of things we need to be more specific about what we're trying to say, but
I feel like we changed this language last year because accessibility generally means something specific, which is accessibility for people with disabilities. And so I think maybe I thought we had changed it to access. Like use access, like I think we took away the EG and had just said access to things like, or yeah, to, I forget what the term was, if it was amenities or resources, but just, we could maybe even keep the example, but like access to these things as opposed to accessibilities. Yes, destinations, there we go. It's been a long, several snow days at this point. And I think that gets more clearly to what I think this bullet is trying to do.
Okay. Okay, so as transportation manager, Raymond, do you read this and understand kind of the meaning behind it? And do you think that this?
Yeah, I think so. And I thank Molly for bringing that back up, because I do remember having that conversation. If I remember correctly, I think, Wan Wu was one of the ones that was bringing this up, especially putting on his planning commission member hat, this idea of, it's just putting down bike lanes to nowhere may not be achieving kind of our outcomes, but we should really be looking at what they connect to. So I read this and I think it makes sense, and I do appreciate the clarification that Molly is trying to distinguish, because accessibility often refers to things like related to ADA, which I think we talk about a little further down and is important. But I don't want to conflate those terms. So kind of using a different term such as just access and then giving those examples, I think helps clarify things for me. So
okay. Great. So similar to that, the next one, use bike lane and sidewalk connectivity as an important metric by which to prioritize transportation investments. So that seems like it's building on the bullet point before it.
And sorry to interrupt, Brett. Wan Wu, I thought I saw the corner of my eye. You had your hand up, so I just wanted to.
Oh, no, I was just giving you a thumbs up. I agree that access to destinations or that connectivity is an important facet. So no, mostly just a thumbs up. Agreed.
Expand the bicycle purchase incentive program and consider including non-electric bikes. Did this sunset this year? Is this incentive program still around? Does anybody know?
In some of my discussions with Missy Stoltz, I think there's still an interest in either reinvigorating the program, broadening the program. So this still feels relevant based on my conversations with her. I don't know what form it's taking. I know they're working on that, and I'll get periodic updates, but I haven't been following it too closely. But
yeah, I just wasn't sure if expand was the right word or reinitiate. Okay. Let's see, increase the amount of Act 51 from 5% to 20% to the alt fund, alternative transportation fund.
I feel like is that maybe obsolete? And Erica, I feel like I need to turn to you on this one, because I remember in last year's budget, like the actual budget process, the argument was that there are a lot of different sources of funding, and there was a reason why we couldn't increase specifically the Act 51 set aside. Is any of this ringing any bells?
It is, and we actually, Councilmember Ackman and I had a long conversation with our staff around this and finance, and trying to figure out kind of where can we expand the pot a little bit, and what's the best way to advocate for it. And obviously we could do this, but it's there might be better strategies than going after Act 51 in some ways. It's better off in some ways. The takeaways that, if I'm recalling correctly, and I need to revisit my notes to make sure I am, I will correct in the future, or Mr. Hess, please correct if I'm saying something that seems wildly inaccurate, that it might be more useful to, instead of advocating from 5 to 20%, to say, here are some key projects that we're trying to advance, and to be advocating for the budget to be enhanced to accomplish those specific goals, because they often tend to be sort of project based. And so it's it just might be a little more effective in terms of achieving the goals of the Transportation Commission to take a different strategy approach.
So maybe instead of talking about this Act 51 set aside, to just ask for increasing the funding to the alt fund in general, regardless, regardless of where the funding would come from. And I don't know.
Or we may want to talk not specifically even about the alt fund, but just increase funding for non-motorized transportation projects, without naming a source or a destination. Erica, is that?
I think that might be a little bit more accurate in terms of, or, more aligned with what the goals are.
Okay.
I like that. Yeah, I think it's critically important to have some kind of budget ask in this list. So I think that's a good way of wording it.
And sorry, I missed, was the idea to just increase the amount of funding for non-motorized projects? Is that kind of the gist of what we're getting at?
I think that's right.
I don't know if we want to put a number on it or if we can put a number on it, but
I mean, Erica, would it be? Because what I've learned is that if you ask in the wrong words, it can be easy to just have that get completely lost. So, does it make sense to ask for things like base year-over-year increases of funding for non-motorized transportation? Or like,
I mean, from my perspective, the ask here is clear from the Transportation Commission in terms of, what the desire is. It's to increase funding for non-motorized and active transportation projects, and be prioritizing, those, in our budget in terms of how to do that. We have to look at the budget each year in terms of what we're doing. I don't know that it's necessary to say year after year, and because I think this is appropriate.
right. I think that's a good change. All right, continue to advocate for local level policy and land use investments that encourage opportunities for transit supported development. Is this TC1? Does this go away?
I don't think it's just TC1.
Okay.
And also we're not done with TC1.
Yeah, it's true.
And the comprehensive plan is happening.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
And this is one of the changes I didn't yet incorporate. Matt, do you want me to pull over the language that I think you and your team suggested, which is meant to kind of, I think, synchronize some of this? So this is big, and sorry for so I think the idea is framing it under, and maybe Matt, I should give you the floor, but I think the idea is framing it under a bigger umbrella statement and then talking about some sub strategies under that. So Matt, I'll turn it over to you and see if I framed it properly.
Sure, and I think you're on the right track there. What we're trying to do with this suggestion is consolidate several, sort of pro-transit advocacy points that were in last year's bullets. Several of those are brought verbatim forward into this, but as Raymond was saying, sort of group them under a general transit banner, and then we added a couple of other ones. So looking at what Raymond's got on the screen, you see the head bullet, advocate for public transit becoming increasingly competitive. That echoes language that was in last year's. We did add something about coordinating with the rides long range plan. That's a bit of connective tissue because we looked at A20 and the transportation master plan as part of coming up with our plan. So we think there's some synchronicity there in the transit portfolio. The first sub bullet about continued advocacy for local level policy land use investments. That is, I think, exactly the same as last year's. Encouragement of all new municipal facilities for the public to be sited along existing transit routes. That is new. And that's something we're suggesting because sometimes even when land use zoning is opened up, you'll find a municipality or someone else will put a really important public facility 4 blocks away from the nearest bus route, and you kind of are going in two directions there. The third one, increasing on-time travel for bus routes, that is verbatim from last year. We love it. Striving to make transit commuting faster, more convenient, again, verbatim from last year. And then the final three are new ones that are suggestions that pertain to bus stop construction and maintenance. So I'll stop there, Raymond, but thank you for the opportunity to sort of share this idea of consolidating these into a single sort of transit suggestion and then adding a few others. I'm happy to answer questions or however I can be helpful.
I really appreciate the last couple of new ones here. I didn't know that, for example, the ride is has to pay fees for permits and stuff. So thanks so much for putting so much thought into this, Matt. Comments on the new, well, some of them are from the previous version, but any other comments on what's being proposed here for this block of bullet points? I think they're all great. I think we'll be able to remove some that are farther down, I assume, Raymond, right?
Yeah. I do think there's one missing, perhaps. Raymond, was there one about snow clearing in what we sent? There was a third one towards the bottom, which, given the last 72 hours, I think is very appropriate, just having to do with coordination with the city on snow removal. There we go.
Yes, thank you, Matt. Sorry I missed that one.
So, and maybe if I might, Brett, just speak to these three a little bit very briefly. Bus stops are a key piece of public infrastructure. We're very reliant on the municipalities. We work generally very well with the city of Ypsi, Ypsi Township, Pittsfield Township, to create bus stops. We have over 1,100 of them throughout the service area. But sometimes we get kind of caught up in right-of-way management, which is absolutely a municipal function. We don't dispute that. But anything that cities can do to expedite the creation of this better bus stop infrastructure, we think just advances the city's own goals, including we have actually really good work so far with them about coordinating with ongoing construction. Permitting fees are still kind of a surprising thing, and they take a while. And then snow collection, we're responsible for removal of snow on the bus stops, but the city has a complimentary, plowing program for the roads. And that's where we end up with the piles of snow in the curb or in the gutter that we call windrows that can become small mountainous obstacles to bordering and alighting the bus. So anything we can do there to just work with the city to have the plows perhaps avoid creating those windrows would only expedite the growth in transit ridership.
Thanks, Pete.
Matt, you mentioned bus stop improvements, and I guess I'm wondering, there seems to be a wide variety of bus stop infrastructure that we have. Like some bus stops are just a sign in the lawn extension on grass, and some have a cement pad, and some have a place to sit and a shelter. Like, is there a standard that we should be striving for? Is there some minimum that we should be asking for and saying that all of them should at least have like a cement pad so that someone in a wheelchair can easily get to the bus instead of having to go off-road through grass? Or, I mean, is there do we need to be more prescriptive there?
Thank you for that question, Pete. And it kind of gets to the second bullet from the end. about lead walks. And the lead walk is that piece of concrete that connects the sidewalk to the curb. That's your accessible path of travel for anyone in a wheelchair, for example. It is our goal at the ride to have lead walks at every bus stop in the city, as well as in Ypsi and Ypsi Township, as long as there are sidewalks nearby. That's a Americans with Disabilities Act requirement. So that is our goal. That is sort of a new minimum standard. I think it's captured in that bullet there. We don't expect the city to pay for that concrete. We'll do that. It's really about the permitting to get that done that I think is the minimum standard. Beyond that, the ride is entirely financially responsible for the benches, the shelters, the poles, the signs. We handle all of that, and that's usually provided through sort of utilization formulas. So if a bus stop has more than 50 boardings a day, we consider it for a shelter, for example. But there are many bus stops that don't quite hit that threshold. It just doesn't seem to make sense for a $10,000 bus shelter that might not get used that often. So there's a degree of that going on. But absolutely, that second bullet from the end about the lead walks, that really pertains to making the bus service fully accessible for everyone in the community.
All right. No other changes, and let's move on to the next section here. Yeah, so some of these can be removed. So this one, enforcement action, maintain clear bike lanes, launching bounty program. I think this is kind of still outstanding, if I recall. I mean, it's, I think it was maybe thought about or considered, but I just kind of still just hanging out there from what I can tell. Anybody have anything to update on this one? All right, implement major streets traffic calming speed management program. I think we can, well, we've designed the program. I guess we still need to direct Raymond to implement it. So I guess if he's okay with that staying there. Incorporate traffic calming into all street resurfacing projects. Again, I think the plan is there. Let's see. Oh, what do you want us to say?
Yeah, this was one of the ones that with the passage of the updated traffic calming resolution, that was championed by this commission. I didn't know if you felt satisfied whether this, is addressed. Now, obviously, it's going to be ongoing, right? Because the idea is, incorporate traffic calming into street resurfacing projects. So if you want to keep this on here to monitor the space, to make sure that it's being done, I think that's fine. But I just wanted to flag the fact that, you all helped champion some legislation that passed at the local level that did incorporate traffic calming elements as a sort of procedural consideration into, street resurfacing projects. So really whatever your pleasure is here. Just wanted to flag it that, there was some momentum on this from last year to this year.
Well, members of the subcommittee, right, Molly and Erica, how do you both feel about keeping this or removing this?
I'd love to keep it and make sure it's actually happening before we take it off the list. Because it's not actually happening yet. Right? Like it's passed. But sorry?
It's happening.
Oh,
yeah. We'll report out on that.
Awesome. I guess it's winter, so there's not really, these projects aren't happening right now. So I'm excited to see the outcome of this, but yeah, I don't know. I feel like it doesn't hurt to leave it another year until we actually get all the way through a cycle.
I was gonna say I'm fine with that. I personally love to check things off my list, and there was a success this last year, so I would love to see it checked off. But I can understand the desire for more additional monitoring.
Okay. we'll leave that for next year.
You know, maybe the policy document isn't the place for it anymore, and maybe we want to make sure it's in the work plan, which I think we already approved at the last meeting. That we're gonna hear back about it once some planning is complete. So yeah, I guess I could go either way.
And I don't have any reservations if you want to keep it. I was just, you know, after last meeting, I was asked to flag some that, you know, where there was progress made, and this was a very obvious one. So that's all I was trying to do here. But
we could change the wording to something like, if we want to leave it, something like implement the revised traffic calming program, which blah blah blah.
Yeah, we can, it's true. As in terms of policy, this has been achieved. I think that is right. So this is a policy document. So I think we can, I'm changing my mind. We can cross this off, but let's make sure, let's find some other way to like keep an eye on it, I guess is my point.
Yeah, certainly at the project level, I, you know, intend to look at all projects through this lens of that this policy exists. So, okay. Oh, Raymond, we're giving you an out to get rid of it. You know, if you have some good wording, then that's fine. Okay. I'm fine with that wording.
so
Right.
yeah, the suggested language says ensure that the traffic calming resolution passed in 2023 is put into action and that traffic calming is incorporated into all street resurfacing projects. Does that strike a good balance? Okay.
Yep. Thank you. Define how transportation infrastructure is to be used and distinguish between, let's see, what is it? Distinguish the difference between streets, roads, and stroads. I'm not sure where this would be satisfied. I mean, are there internal, but yeah, I struggle with, is this just Raymond Hess writing a memo or something? I don't know. Does anybody have a vision for how this would be achieved at the local level? Raymond, do you have an understanding of how you think this could be achieved, or is this something that we consider getting rid of? I'm not really sure what the intent is here.
My understanding of the intent was, you know, if you kind of follow this difference between streets, roads, and stroads about, you know, how many American roads have been built with this sort of identity crisis where they are both high speed through roads, but then also have a lot of activity and collectors and destinations along them, shopping and residences and things like that. And so that creates this sort of like conflict and, you know, leads to crashes. And so I think the idea was, you know, being more again, and I think this may have come from Wan Wu, but so hopefully I'm not putting words in his mouth, but I think the idea was, you know, being more deliberate about how roads are configured, how they are, like what their purpose is, how they're serving, you know, not just vehicles or bikes or peds, but also the adjacent land uses. So it, you know, it's a little harder one, I think, for you know, to conceptualize because it's a little bit more technical. But I think from my perspective, I think I understand the intent of what it means.
Okay, and I fully support the intent that you just kind of verbalized there. Okay, Erica.
Since I need to take this forward, I also need to understand a little bit what intent. That helps me. One of the things that's been on my list that I've been asking, and I think this aligns with what you were just saying, Mr. Hess, which is that it might manifest in the form of a right-of-way plan. or right-of-way plans, in the sense that we don't have a very clear articulation of how we want to, what's the design that we're looking for particular roads. That's been come up a lot during TC1 discussions, but I think it's relevant on pretty much every road in our community. You know, what do we want in the street, and how does that connect to our private land use as well? Because when we're asking for different something from the developer there, we need to know how much space we need. So I don't know if that aligns with previous conversations that the commission has had. I do think it's a conversation that we need to continue having both here and in planning.
So I added based on what Erica just said, and again, this is just throwing out some rough draft language that to help maybe clarify the point that this may include development of right-of-way plans and alignment with adjacent land uses, especially TC1. Again, no pride of authorship. Happy to change that, delete it if folks don't think that's capturing the intent.
I think it helps me. Everybody else okay with that addition? Okay. All right, moving on. Expand and improve infrastructure and policy to encourage the use of clean energy vehicles, electric vehicle charge points, policy for four-wheeled light electric vehicles, electrification and downsizing of city-owned vehicles, improve and expand parking facilities for bikes, including covered and lighted parking areas, possible incentives from the city to encourage the use of clean energy vehicles by residents and businesses. Any additions or changes or deletions that people want to propose for this? All right, if not, advocate and enable local power grid initiatives required by the 820 plan, which would allow for carbon-free EV charging. All right, no changes. Improve winter sidewalk maintenance to ensure walkability and accessibility year-round, with emphasis on sidewalks located downtown, in residential areas, and those needed to access bus stops. Yes, Pete.
After the last few days, I kind of feel like we have the right policy here. And I'm trying to think of the right way to say that we need to be enforcing the requirements better. So I'm not like I can't think of a policy that I want to change. What I want is to see what we've asked for actually put in practice in terms of, you know, people clearing in front of their houses and in front of their businesses, and like city plows clearing from curb to curb. Like, these are all the things that we say we're supposed to do, but we're just not doing them. So maybe that's a conversation about our yearly work plan, and not, you know, not something that we need to change in this document. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, this does, I mean, the first four words are improve winter sidewalk maintenance.
Or enforcement, sidewalk maintenance enforcement. I don't know. I feel like like I said, we already know what we need to do. We're not enforcing it. So what's the right way to?
Yeah, I mean, this kind of leaves it open to any means to achieve that, whether it be enforcement or programs, you know, the snow buddy programs, expanded city, you know, asking the city to do more, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not sure if, you know, there'd be appetite to narrow it down to enforcement only, but you know, if you want to propose that, but you know, this kind of leaves it open to just improving the
yeah,
main
I get it, and I'm wondering if would we be more likely to get some progress on it if we said, let's just focus on this one part. Like, this is a very broad statement that we're making here. What if we say, like, let's get what we're supposed to be doing, let's get it right first, and then we'll figure out whether we need additional policy change. So I guess I am proposing narrowing this down for that reason.
Let me call on Pravina first, and
Yeah.
and maybe we'll make a proposed change to this one. Pravina?
Sorry, this is my first time really going through this. Why are we focusing on sidewalks located downtown only? Is there a reason why this is focused only on downtown sidewalks?
I think it was just to make it more manageable and to focus on the areas with the highest pedestrian counts.
Yeah, I mean, this one gives me pause because I mean, I really want to think about how people are getting downtown or getting around our city. And if we're ignoring where people are moving in communities that need public transportation and can't get to a bus stop or move around and don't live downtown, I don't want to be so downtown centric. We should really make this a citywide or maybe even expand the grid from the main downtown area, in my opinion.
We did include the words in residential areas and those needed to access bus stops. So it's not just downtown, but I understand where you're coming from. Yeah, this was a conscious decision made last year to add these words.
I mean, if I was reading this, I would just see the downtown and not understand residential areas. Residential areas for me would then mean downtown residential areas and not the whole city.
Erica?
Somebody who will be taking this forward, I fully understand. I completely understand your point, Pravina, and agree that those outlying areas outside of the downtown absolutely need focus as well. And I do think there's a benefit in calling out downtown because there's a memo that I do think that the place to revisit this is it within the work plan. I was going to bring it up next. I know that we've been taking complaints over the last couple of days on the city council and been pushing for some follow-up on the memo that council requested back in, I don't know if we received it last year or 2 years ago now, but essentially we need more evaluation and monitoring of the progress we're making because we can see that we're not making the progress that we need. But I do think that it is more than enforcement. I think you can see that we're seeing some new issues now around our new infrastructure around in the downtown in particular. You can see around the new cycle tracks that the snow clearance isn't happening particularly well in those areas. So I do think we should be revisiting this and looking to see what progress we're having. But I think the work plan is the place to do it so we can get some ongoing evaluation and monitoring and reporting out about how we're going to fix the problems that we're seeing.
I do like this change to high pedestrian activity areas because it opens it up for expanding spaces and that can be determined. I'm not sure how that's determined what's high pedestrian, but thank you.
With the question of enforcement, do we want to add anything about enforcement? And would that be understood to include the city? On city property, like including bike lanes, for example. If we just put enforcement, does that okay, walkability and bikeability? I like that change. Or Pete, did you want to propose an all new separate bullet point talking about enforcement?
I say let's save the enforcement conversation for a topic in our work plan. I think that we should add winter maintenance to our work plan. It's not there yet, and okay. we should add it and talk about enforcement though.
Okay. All right. Thanks. What we have I think just a couple more, hopefully. Oh, is that it? All right. Any additions to the local policy agenda list? All right. Thank you so much, Raymond, for going through this and making on the fly changes. That really helps. So is there a motion to approve the Transportation Commission fiscal year 2025 policy agenda as discussed and to forward it to the City Council? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Matt, seconded by Wanwu. All those in favor of the motion, please say yes or raise your hand. All those opposed to the motion, please say no or raise your hand. All right, the motion passes, and hopefully the wordsmithing portion of this meeting is over. All right, but I think it's
Yes, I was voting for it too, but I couldn't get on the, sorry, but I couldn't get on the unmuted quick enough.
All right, thanks, Larry. We'll record that. All right, next up, 2024 work plan. So we approved the work plan last month, but staff updated the document based on conversations from last month and are going to re-present it to us. So Raymond, if you could.
Yeah, so I think there were some suggestions that came up today. That we do consider this a living document, even though we asked for your approval in December or January, so you did approve this already. Things change, right? Because things shift around. Either they move up in importance or move down in importance, or new issues emerge and come into focus, and we tackle those. So, I just wanted to kind of reshare the document with you all. We had some time on the agenda, so we thought there was an opportunity to just kind of, go over the changes that were made last time. And then also, continue to take suggestions and plug in, some agendas, items as well. We always do try to kind of keep a balance, and there's a lot to discuss, but trying to, take care of the business that needs to be taken care of in a sort of timely fashion, and those that maybe are a little bit less time sensitive to plug those in a little later. We did a good job, I think, last month doing that. So, January, obviously, that's this meeting. For next meeting, one of the things that has emerged that I want to draw your attention to is this discussion about the All Ages and Abilities Bike Network. I think there was some suggestion at the end of last meeting to, revisit the All Ages and Abilities Bike Network, what those facilities are, and have a specific conversation about what's being proposed on Miller Avenue. Part of this is in, response to, a position statement made by Walk Bike Washtenaw, and kind of talking through the considerations that are going in along Miller. And we thought, that would be appropriate to have that discussion in February. One thing I will note is, every year we talk about the resurfacing program, and, in the policy agenda, we talked about how things are going to be incorporated with traffic calming. So that'll be an opportunity for you to see some of those things that are being teed up for this next construction cycle. We shifted down some of the traffic calming petitions that are currently in queue just based on where they're at, but expect Bird to come next month, and then Arella and Henry to come in March. We added the signalized intersections and pedestrian crossings. I think we mentioned that last time, based on, some of the conversations and some of the analysis that I think Pete has done. Let's see.
Hey, Raymond, would it be helpful to share? I'm not sure if you're.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I was.
You're doing a really good job of verbalizing it, but I figured it might be nice to see it.
Yes, no, thank you. Sorry about that. I thought I hit the button, but I did not. Yeah, so I just walked through February. Here we are in March. This was one of the ones that we also talked about and we added last month, which is this crash response protocol. So that was added. Again, we plugged it in April just because there seemed to be some time on that agenda. Then another thing that has come up is some of you have been following the news about what's happening with Bird and Spin. And so we'll be contemplating that existing contract and taking that to council before the end of the fiscal year, which our fiscal year ends June 30th. So probably a discussion in May would be appropriate. So then that way that can be teed up for that. And I think there are going to be some regular updates. I know, for example, there was some discussion about downtown circulation study updates, or even Safe Streets for All updates. Some of those are moving targets. We hope to bring folks back at a regular kind of interval, but we just are, for example, for Safe Streets for All, we still are waiting for the final contract to be approved by Federal Highway Administration, even though we are a year plus after the award announcement. So that's just how these things sometimes shift. So that's an example of that. We talked about bus lanes and improved transit. I think that was a suggestion that came out of last meeting. Linear parks was another suggestion that came out of last meeting. Yeah, and so I think that covers, some of the new things that were added since last time. But again, there were some discussions that came up today. I think, I'm hearing winter maintenance for sidewalks and or bike lanes. My one cautionary tale to you is February looks like it will probably be a fairly full agenda, especially if you want a very kind of heavy conversation about winter maintenance. I know the timing seems pertinent to have now, and we can always defer something like the street resurfacing presentation to another month if you would prefer. But we think the trunk line transfer feels timely, and we should probably have that discussion next month, as well as the All Ages and Abilities Bike Network have that conversation next month as well, because of how we're trying to move that work along. So if there's suggestions on where to plug in winter maintenance, happy to do that, or if you just want us to find a way to plug that in, happy to do that. And if there are any other suggestions, we can take notes on that, figure out ways of incorporating those.
Yeah, we'll add that to our agenda topics list for sure, and then get it in where appropriate. Erica?
Yeah, I certainly defer to staff on when you think this would be best in terms of a presentation. My desire is to make sure that, and I'd sent a message that I had copied the transportation staff on this, but to Mr. Fournier earlier, a couple of days ago, regarding the memo that we had received on sidewalk clearance and the sort of improvements that the city had was aiming to make based on council desire. And a lot of that involved monitoring. And we can see after this first heavy storm of the season, which was particularly hard in terms of the heavy snow with wet and then the immediate freeze, but we can see some problems. I'm certainly getting reports of it. And I think we can see it particularly in the downtown, but it's all across the community. And so I guess I want to see that we're monitoring this and that we're evaluating how we're going to improve both our own city operations, but also, what's the connectivity and access across the downtown. And one of the reasons we had focused in on the downtown is because we actually have such a comprehensive network of kind of like, the Main Street areas is doing clearance. And so it's easier to make progress and to monitor our progress in that area. So I'm being super long-winded. Anyway, I don't know where it needs to be fit in, if it needs to actually happen in February, but the work needs to happen over the next couple of months to provide that presentation and to make progress.
Okay. Anything else? As always, of course, please contact any of us with ideas for agenda topics as they come up, and we will always work to include those. All right, this is the plan as it is now, and like Raymond said, things will move, things will certainly be added, but yeah, this is what we've got at a minimum for this year. All right, next up, staff report and updates. You received a staff report providing project updates with your agenda materials, like every month. Raymond, now if you wouldn't mind reviewing that report.
All right, January is always a fun one to report on because pretty much everything is new. So I get to kind of highlight all of them. But you'll notice some of them will kind of stagnate for the next couple months because really construction season won't ramp up. So there might be, some movement on design and things like that, but you're probably gonna, the January report tends to be a little bit bigger. February tends to be a pretty short report. So just want to kind of temper expectations about what these updates will look like in the next couple months. So the 2023 resurfacing projects, just wanted to kind of talk about some of the projects that are carrying over. So Aberdeen, Burson, Hawthorne, Norfolk, Shenandoah, and Suffolk. are some of the projects that are will be completed in 2024 that were originally identified as 2023 projects, but it's always just a function of, weather and funding and contractor availability in terms of what gets done and what doesn't. Teeing up the 2024 resurfacing project, there is a project website for that as well. The area is kind of a focus of the Lakewood neighborhood, and then kind of the, I think it's Burwood, so, south of Jackson, east of Stadium, north of Liberty, kind of that area. And then there is some talk of redoing an asphalt path on the north side of Glacier Way near the Earhart intersection. Again, you're going to get a presentation on this next month from Nick Hutchinson. So he'll go into a lot more detail, kind of show you the geography of the areas of interest and the different types of work that will be done. Sidewalk gaps, the new projects that are being identified are Glendale Circle and Fair Street, Stone School Road, Sunnywood and Gray Lake intersection. And then there are some kind of carryovers. Ellsworth was one of the ones that was substantially complete, but there was one gap that remained due to a utility conflict. And then there's another project on Burwood Avenue, a single lot. State and Hill improvements. So for those of you that have followed this project, State is largely done, but Hill wasn't able to be done this year. So that will be the focus for spring of 2024. So it'll be nice to have that project completed. East Medical Center Drive, Council did approve the resolution for the project on December 18th. And construction is expected to begin in March. At the time of the writing of this, I don't think it had yet passed, but it has since. So let's see. Miller Avenue, we talked about coming to you next month with a more exhaustive discussion about this. So stay tuned. We've mentioned to you in the past that there was kind of a capital project that afforded us the opportunity to expand the bike facility that the DDA built further to the west. So there's still some desire to make bicycle infrastructure improvements along that corridor. And we'll come to you with our latest thinking at the next meeting. 7th Street in Greenview. I think some of you followed this project. We've came to several times on it. And we made some, substantive changes, especially to 7th Street. And then those were kind of carried forward on Greenview as well. It includes stormwater improvements, road narrowing, rain gardens, sand filters, underground stormwater storage, water main replacement, resurfacing, bump outs, crosswalks. And there's a project webpage that gives you a lot more detail on that. That project is scheduled for this coming year. Projects currently in planning and design, the South Main Street sidewalk gap. So this is along Ann Arbor Golf and Outing, the opposite side of Pioneer High School. That project is being planned, it's being designed, and hopefully construction will happen in 2025. It's also trying to be coordinated with the Arbor on Main development, which is at the corner of Main and Ann Arbor Saline, right across from the Bushes. It was formerly known as Valhalla. So trying to coordinate a lot of that it'll be a nice addition to the sidewalk network on a pretty high profile section of Main Street that currently lacks sidewalks. State Street North University. This is kind of the next phase of State Street. The city's been doing in partnership with the DDA several different chunks. So this is William to South U, and on North University from State to Fletcher. There's water main replacement, stormwater improvements, street resurfacing, sanitary sewer work, bike lanes, intersection improvements, and evaluation of crosswalk improvements. Design is underway. There's also a lot of discussion right now as well about transit improvements. So there are discussions going on with the RIDE as well as the university about ways, that's a very heavily used transit corridor by not just the RIDE, but also the blue buses of the University of Michigan. And so trying to figure out ways that we can help improve their operations on State Street. Nixon Road reconstruction. for those of you, again, who followed this for a while now, when I first came to the city back in 2018, 2019 is when there was a lot of public engagement and design concepts about roundabouts. So we're coming up on actually having the funding to start implementing those projects. So construction is planned for 2025. So they'll kind of start blowing the dust off those plans, updating them, and start getting into kind of the final design for water main, sanitary, stormwater, roundabouts, bicycle and pedestrian improvements. Pauline water main, this is from 7th Street to Main Street. So, again, back in 2018, I think it was, Pauline was done west of 7th. So this is the section between 7th and Main. Again, some of that what's driving the work are water main replacements, but because this is also on our all ages and abilities bike network, we'd be looking at a possible road reconfiguration to accommodate that all ages and abilities bike facility. We don't know what that is yet, but we know that the plan calls for some sort of upgrade along that corridor. So once design starts, we'll start thinking about what those options are. Pittsfield Village improvements. This is a large area bounded by Pittsfield Boulevard, Whitewood, and Pinecrest. Again, water main is the driving force with our driving work behind it. Stormwater improvements, sanitary sewer improvements, and some road resurfacing. We may look at some other opportunities for non-motorized enhancements as well. The downtown circulation study, you all got a fairly good update on that just recently. So, we are looking to take some of those concepts that you got first crack at and start vetting those publicly here in the spring of 2024. And again, the idea is to really try to bring, to synchronize all of these different efforts between the DDA's plans, the rides plans, the city's plans about how we can really improve mobility downtown. The state trunk line jurisdiction transfer analysis. We are hoping to bring this to you next month. We are finalizing a report right now with our consultant, Sam Schwartz. And we want to kind of bring those findings to you and then also figure out a way to get those in front of council as well. So stay tuned for more on that. I alluded to this earlier when we talked about the work plan, but Spin's parent company Bird is going through financial restructuring. We've been in several conversations with Spin since that announcement. They have indicated to us that they do not anticipate any changes to their operation, that we are one of their stronger markets, and therefore they expect to be able to continue to provide the service that they are providing now and into the future. We're monitoring the space closely because, as you can imagine, financial restructuring and bankruptcy are things not to be taken lightly. So it is something we definitely want to kind of get minute by minute updates on, and we've been in close contact with our colleagues at Spin to get the latest information on that. Like I said, we do hope to bring this back to the commission in May, probably, to talk about the renewal of the contract with the micromobility provider. All right. MDOT coordination, I just wanted to flag the US 23 improvement project, which this commission passed a resolution on the last quarter of last year. I can't remember what month it was, maybe November. Was giving signals to MDOT to pay special attention to the non-motorized crossings across US 23 and also discourage anything that would increase vehicular capacity. And I'm paraphrasing, so please afford me that luxury. I did just want to let you know I was on a stakeholder meeting last week. There is talk of a public engagement opportunity on February 1st, and there are still 4 design alternatives that are being considered, 2 of which do add general purpose vehicular capacity, adding a general purpose lane and adding a flex lane. And then the 4th option is maybe more nuanced, which is a high occupancy vehicle lane is also up for consideration. Right. Streetlight fixes by DTE. This should reflect, I think, the final number for 2023, and we'll start updating new numbers for 2024. Traffic calming program submittals. Bird did close, and it appears there is support for the project. So you heard me say we're bringing that back to you. Arella and Henry, final polling just closed this week. I don't think we've had a chance to tally those results, but if they pass, they will be brought forward to the Transportation Commission at a future meeting. And just as a reminder, for those of you who are maybe new to this space, even though there are changes to the traffic calming program, which would no longer require kind of this final polling and final approval process steps, we pretty much said that anything that was already in queue is kind of grandfathered under the old existing program, which is why we're still trying to keep people who are in the program, give them that same level of expectation about what that looks like. So the queue was long, so you're going to continue to see these for a little while yet. Carbon reduction program grants. The big thing to note here is we just closed the survey on a preference survey about color, temperature, and wattage for the streetlight upgrade. So again, the idea is to take all the high pressure sodium lights that DTE owns and operates and upgrade those to light emitting diode or LED lights. So we put out on the street several different pilots that were of different wattages and different color temperatures. The idea is to try to be sensitive to and somewhat consistent with the dark skies ordinance. So those results just closed. We're still kind of looking those over before we make a recommendation on how to proceed. And then lastly, the Lunch and Learn series continues. Again, this is something we've been trying to do to really just make this standard practice among multiple city departments to incorporate Vision Zero and safe systems into all the work that's being done, not just, capital projects, but, all activities, planning, enforcement, so forth and so on. And so these are held, for city staff to come attend. They've been pretty well attended. And typically what we do is we try to do a deep dive on a specific topic. Like, for example, I think the next couple are focused on maintenance of traffic, in particular, how we accommodate bicycles and pedestrians when, sidewalks are being closed or bike lanes are being closed as a result of adjacent construction, and trying to get people to think about more creative solutions about how we can ensure that those systems remain, usable for everyone. All right, and with that, that concludes the highlights I wanted to make. I'm happy to entertain any questions that you all may have.
Thank you, Raymond. If anyone has any questions, feel free to email. Next, liaison reports. Are there any commissioners who have served as a liaison to another body or organization that have a brief report or update to provide? Now is the time. All right. If there aren't any, then commission member communications. Are there any commissioners that would like to provide any report or updates? Yeah, Pete.
List of pedestrian and bicycle crashes was attached. Hopefully people had a chance to see that again for the month of November in this case. As has happened a few other times this year, there was a crash, a severe A severity, we call it, crash that was missing from that list. It happened on November 27th. It's not reflected in the administrator's report, and it's not reflected in, that same report that was attached to our agenda. So I would just like to point out that we appear to have some breakdown in our process for collecting and reporting those. And what it results in is an apparent undercounting of the number of severe crashes that we have. So it would, I I would like to get that fixed, and I don't know where that breakdown is, but I'm going to point it out again. This has happened in January of 2023. There was a crash at Main and Kingsley that wasn't counted, and there was also a fatality of a scooter rider on Hill Street that was not included in the city administrator report. So please, can we figure out where that is going wrong and get it fixed? Thank you.
All right, thank you, Pete. And I know that in the near future, we have a crash response protocol topic that will be coming forward. And I think that'd be a good topic to discuss then. All right, call for agenda items. We've kind of already gone through what's coming in the near future here. If you have any agenda item requests or ideas, please, as always, email them or, let us know any way you prefer. Okay, the next meeting will be held Wednesday, February 21st at 7 p.m. This will also be a virtual meeting. And so if there are no objections, we will adjourn our January 17th. Yeah, yes, one move.
Just really quickly, I want to say welcome back, Erica, and thank you to Dharma. So welcome back. Good to see you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, the sentiment is copied, I'm sure, by everyone. Thank you. All right, no objections. We will adjourn our January 17th, 2024 meeting. All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Meeting's
Good night.
adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.